Good morning, Portugal. Munson here with the Good Morning Portugal show with expatsportugal.com. How are you today? Do shout out in the comments, please. My special guest today. Let's bring him on, shall we, without further ado, because I think this is going to be a very busy Ask Anything About Portugal session, which we always do on a Wednesday. My old friend and expert about all things Portuguese, especially around the Lisbon area, is Michael Heron from Avanlight. Good morning to you, Michael. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Munson. I'm very well, thank you. How are you, sir?
I'm pretty good. I'm delighted to have you back because it's been about a year, pretty much.
Yeah, I was just looking the last time we spoke on this show, and I think it was almost a year to the day.
Yes.
And I'm very impressed with the professionalism of that introduction. That's amazing. Was that your breakfast in the first couple of shots? Was that you?
Wonderful guy called Pete Wilton Davies in central Portugal. That chronicles, I think, his lifestyle, the enviable lifestyle we're talking about on Wednesdays and every day here. And it's a beautiful vignette, isn't it, of Portuguese life?
It's a lovely vignette. And you know what? Often when you see stock footage of Portugal, it's always the typical, images of the 25 de Abril bridge in Lisbon or footage of a Porto. So to get to see more rural Portugal at its finest, I think it's truly unique. So yeah, it's really nice to see.
Or the Barcelo cockerel here that I use.
That's absolutely. Well, it's better than my white wall behind me.
But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It's funny, isn't it? What I suppose it's what the PR agencies come up with, isn't it? And it's the iconic things. Pastel de nata, obviously, in there as well, somewhere in the mix.
Exactly.
So I hope you're well and that life is treating you well in Lisbon. I mean, it's like we're saying, it's been a year since you were last on, and things have changed. I no longer have a little microphone gaffer taped to an angle poised lamp stand with my IKEA world map behind me, which I think was the last backdrop. A lot has changed, has it not? Not just for us, but in the world. And when we first talked, or when we last talked, it's like, well, what are you thinking about this pandemic thing then? Do you think it's going to be? Do you think it's going to be a big deal? We could not have known, Michael.
I know, it's terrifying, isn't it? We were so blasé about it as well. We were like, oh yeah, it'll be fine, no problem. Everyone's panicking, and look what's happened. So, look, I think I was watching an interview with Louis Theroux the other day, and he basically just said, look, at the end of the day, we're simply talking about a virus which is DNA wrapped in protein that self-replicates. Yet look at how vulnerable we are. And I think that was a really valid point. It has shown how vulnerable we truly are because it's affected everyone, obviously in different manners, because some people have more of a comfortable lifestyle at home, shall we say. So when everyone's locked in, obviously it affects everyone in different ways, but in the same way, in the sense we're all having to stay at home. So, I think it's given us also an opportunity to come together more as a community, and I guess even more so a show like yours now that brings together the expat community in Portugal. It's really valuable, and delighted to be here again with you.
Oh, good to see you. And that's quite a sort of shocking description from Louis there, isn't it? That kind of nails it and the seriousness of things. And yes, I would like to think, and we'll after you've introduced yourself and tell people a little bit about what you do for those who don't know you, we'll introduce you to a few of the community who are lining up to say hello this morning. So if you will, Michael, Avanlight is your consultancy. You're in Lisbon. What is it you do for people, and how long have you been in Portugal so people know?
Yeah, that's right. So obviously my name is Michael Heron. I've been in Portugal. I'm from the UK originally. I've been in Portugal for this will be my 7th year in June. So yeah, it's gone very quickly. Wow. And about 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago to the day, I founded a company called Avanlight, which predominantly works with law firms providing business development and communications consultancy, but we also work with anyone looking to relocate to Portugal, or businesses that are looking to open, their operations in Portugal. So always very happy to talk to people, not just fellow expats, but also locals as well, on this subject.
Terrific, terrific. And I thought we might start with the same subject that we spoke about a year ago, because it will have been affected, of course. I mean, obviously by the pandemic, but also things change, don't they, with how the Portuguese government is hopefully making things easier to start a business here in Portugal. As you described it last time, it's fairly straightforward, subject to a few sort of cultural differences and managing one's expectations. But we'll do that in just a moment, if we may, and say hello to a few of our lovely community here. As you rightly said, I mean, the Good Morning Portugal show has become a bit of a focal point during the pandemic, so we can all check in with each other and have a virtual hug in the mornings and make sure everybody's okay. Over in California, for example, Hank is here. Hola, bon dia. From your native UK, Paul is here. Greetings from Harrogate in North Yorkshire there. Oh, I miss these wonderful, those wonderful fresh Algarve oranges for breakfast. Yeah, absolutely. I hope my little man at the side of the road who sells the oranges is okay. Signs for return to Portugal looking better. They are by the day, aren't they, Paul? It's really good news to see and feel that happening. Penny, also in the UK, in Devon. Hola, bon dia, alegria. That's what we say here, Michael. That's changed as well. We have our own greeting, bon dia, alegria. Bon dia from sunny Povoa de Varzim, from Mark up there in a little known part of Portugal that he's really done a lot of work to introduce us to, and other people. In Moscow, bon dia from Carolyn. Jersey, I can't remember where you are, Jersey, but bon dia, alegria to you. It is my favorite time of the day. Bless you. I think you're in United States, aren't you, Jersey there? And a nice lol right back at you. Hola, bon dia, alegria de la Ria. And that's from the Thompson, one of our regulars and a co-host here, coming soon next Wednesday, I believe, actually. Yes, Doc will make his formal debut next Wednesday in the Ask Anything About Portugal slot. An actual doctor. Wow. Jeff Leland, he started a business, or is starting a business over here in Portugal. He may have some questions for you this morning. Michael, hola, bon dia. Carl, still in the Cotswolds, itching to be here, I suspect. Mark Rigby, yes, echoing your sentiments, Michael. We're all in the same storm, not all in the same boat. The impact of the pandemic and the safety nets people have very enormously. Yeah, we're very well aware of that, and obviously we want to do what we can for the Portuguese people as well, Portuguese society, as we come out of this. Bon dia from Joel, a real Portuguese man who tunes in up there in Porto. Bon dia, alegria from Rizal. Good morning to the Furtados. How you doing, folks? Lovely to have your company. Sorry about this, Michael. There are just so many of them.
This is fantastic. No, carry on, please.
Sat there being greeted by the massed ranks of the Good Morning Portugal community. Phil Austin, good morning. Promising new COVID research being reported in Público this morning, Portuguese news outlet. That's good to know, Phil. Thank you. Good morning to you, Phil. Bon dia, alegria from Paul and Louise from the kitchen table there, I suspect, from Atlanta, Georgia. Bon dia, todos from a rainy Atlanta this morning. Hope your house sales going well. Hope you'll be here soon. Victoria Vera Rodriguez from New Jersey this morning. Good morning to you, New Jersey folk. Always a joy to listen to you, says Rizal. Oh, that's nice. I think you guys should meet as well. You'll have a lot in common. The Furtados are starting a new business here, Michael. Jersey, yeah, Long Island, New York, fantastic. Welcome, Neb. Checking in from Twin Falls, Idaho, USA. Good morning to you. Welcome. Bon dia from Peter Bleach, from a scene out of the fog over there in Kent. Interested to hear about employing people in Portugal. So there's our first question, I think. Good morning from head gardener Lee McGrady, because we do a little bit of gardening, Expats Portugal too. And just finally for now, bon dia, alegria from a bright Cabanas de Tavira. Fantastic. I'm sure you're having a lovely morning. And maybe you can find out if that orange seller is okay for Paul, well, from one Paul to another. We hope he is. Hope his business hasn't been affected too much. So start a business. I mean, there is a little bit of a step-by-step in theory, isn't there, which could lead us into employing people. Would you mind taking us through that, Michael?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess the most important thing to highlight is, obviously, if you are coming to Portugal from abroad, then your situation is going to be unique. Not just in terms of the type of business you want to set up, but also your own personal finances and situation in terms of immigration. You know, do you have an EU residency? Which obviously, if you're from the UK, it's not that anymore. Do you have any family that are not from the EU? And then what kind of assets do you have, or what kind of situation are you leaving behind or bringing with you from your home country? So obviously all of these things are really important, and you need to, I think, seek the right kind of advice to ensure that you're getting the best possible outcome for everything in that kind of situation. Because it can be a long process. The bureaucracy here is improved massively since I came here 7 years ago. But as you can imagine, there are still challenges, especially now during this pandemic. But a lot of things can still be done online, which is great, such as setting up a business. But I would always say, when setting up a business, just always start by having a good accountant. It's so important. Obviously, I can recommend someone, I'm sure you can as well, Carl. But having a good accountant is critical, because they will be able to walk you through all the steps, especially if it's an accountant that is used to dealing with people that have set up different kinds of businesses. They will be able to share with you, I guess, mistakes that previous clients of theirs had made before working with them. So they'll be able to save you a lot of time and hopefully a lot of money as well. But it is very, very straightforward. When I did it 4 years ago, it's still the same now. You can set up a company in an hour if you want to set up an LDA, a limited liability company. The only interesting difference, which sometimes shocks people when they come here, is that the fastest way to do it in that hour is you select a company name from a pre-approved list of companies that are dormant. So you don't get to choose your own name. You can do it, but it's a long and lengthy process, and you have to get it approved. So what a lot of people do, like myself, is we have the holding company in a name that has been pre-selected, and then we trade using our own name. So it's just one thing to bear in mind, because it can shock some people when they arrive at the registration office and they're just given this huge list of companies to choose from, and some of the names are quite extraordinary.
So if you wanted to be Dell and Rodney Trotter Enterprises, unless that was lying there dormant, it would be a lengthy process to bag that for yourself.
Exactly. And look, it's even the same with names, right? So I mean, I'm often asked this, why in Portugal, especially with the Portuguese, are there so few names compared to other countries? It seems, we make a joke about it, but it seems that there are so many, we talk about men, so many Joaos, Miguels, Ruiz, and the same with women as well, so many Ritas, Marias, Ana Marias, Ineses. And it's just because it's very difficult to give someone a name, that you want. I know someone from a while ago who wanted to call their son James. And it took a while to get that approved. I think now things are more flexible, but just bear that in mind as well if you have children here.
Yes, and if you're that kind of football fan who names your child after the entire football team, that is going to be different. Although, actually saying that, because it's Portugal, if you are naming your child after a football team, it could be a bit easier. With the
maybe, if it's a Portuguese one, definitely.
Yes, that may have been done. There may be a precedent for that. Fantastic.
Yeah, and then maybe to answer your one of your viewers' questions about employing people in Portugal.
Yes,
that's an interesting one. I mean, I would say one of the things that some business owners are shocked by when they come to Portugal is how expensive it is to employ people because of the high taxes and the high social security contribution that you have to pay for every employee's contract. I think it's around 33%. So it is extremely high. There are more flexible ways of employing people, which I can perhaps go into in more depth with anyone that wants to discuss that off air. But it does mean that it can be a challenge. It can be a challenge, especially also with the type of employment contract. Because if you give somebody a permanent employment contract after 2 years, and don't quote me on this because I'm not a lawyer, but I'm led to believe this is pretty much the case, that it is very difficult, if not impossible, to sack someone if they have a permanent employment contract, unless they've committed a very serious offence. But for something like bad performance, it's very difficult. So a lot of companies will employ people on temporary employment contracts, or even recibos verdes, which is the old green receipts, which is like almost giving someone a freelance contract. So again, there are lots of different ways you can do it, but it is worth bearing in mind that you might be shocked at how expensive it is to employ people on a permanent basis.
It's very interesting, because I guess it would depend which way you look at it. I mean, people are moving to Portugal because the minimum wages are lower, and they're thinking they're going to get a bit of a bargain in terms of workforce. But then that's where they find the devil in that detail, right? So the costs go up because, and in some ways, for the socially minded, it's a very good system that protects the worker here in Portugal. But there are some hidden things there, aren't there? And among them are, I think this came as an interesting surprise to me, was that people in Portugal are employed for 14 months, aren't they? which goes some way to attenuating this shock of how low the minimum wage is. But you get 14 lots of it per year. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So usually what happens is, the idea is that you get, it's like a bonus month that you get in July usually. So the idea is that you have some extra money for your summer holidays. And then in December, so you have some extra money at Christmas as well. So yeah, bear in mind, if you are either offered an employment contract or offering one, that is the standard to offer 14 months.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. And also the lunch thing. That's another lovely.
Yeah.
Like England from the 70s or 80s, where people used to get luncheon vouchers. Are you not obliged to pay some sort of lunch allowance as well?
Yeah, so again, it's a nice way for companies to be able to give their employees an additional bonus, which again, looking at it from the employer perspective is more tax efficient, and then from the employee perspective, it's a nice thing to have. So you're given like a food card. There are different companies in Portugal that offer that service to employers, but you're given a food card. I can't remember the exact amount that it's changed. Oh, there you go, 365 a day. I think it's a bit more than that, actually. I think it's closer to 750, if I'm not mistaken. It works out at about 170 euros a month, something like that. And it's really nice because you can use it anywhere. So anywhere to buy food. So a supermarket and most restaurants as well.
And it drives the economy. That's the great thing about it, I think.
It does, yes.
The persistence of the prato do dia, or the diarrhea daily meal, is driven by that mechanism, isn't it? To attract workers away from their desk, have a proper lunchtime, keep the hospitality economy going in that regard. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, for a family, whatever their economic means, if both man and woman, parents, however you want to call them, well, not always that, but both breadwinners, shall we say, in the family have this food card, then, if it's a family of four, especially in more rural areas in Portugal, as you know, Carl, 350 euros a month is more than enough to feed a family of four for a month. So you get all your supermarket shop done on that, and it's just a very efficient way of doing it, and I guess one less thing to worry about.
Yep, absolutely. That's great. And Valerie Spencer. Good morning, Valerie, by the way, from Spencer Becks. Yes, she had it at 365 a day. You have to pay them for their lunch. This is a boss. This is from the boss point of view, isn't it? What's that all about? She says, and also adds to this conversation. Ask anything about Portugal on a Wednesday here, of course, on the Good Morning Portugal show. Michael Heron's with me. Valerie adding, hiring somebody is expensive, and you have to pay them 8 weeks Christmas bonus. They get 22 days vacation, between 10 and 14 days statutory holidays. Of course, the obligatory monthly holiday that is before any sick days. So effectively, you're paying somebody for approximately 15 weeks, sorry, almost 4 months for not being at work. That is definitely a boss perspective, isn't it? That's the enterprise angle. The Constitution of Portugal, the doc is reminding us, is committed to socialism, hence the good employment terms. Looking at it from the workers' point of view there, absolutely fascinating. A supplementary to that from Wellcube, is there any difference between employing perhaps a housekeeper or a personal assistant versus an employee of an operating business? I suppose technically, legally, there shouldn't be, but there probably is a difference, right?
Yeah, I mean, for most most people will offer their housekeeper a contract, or a nanny or something, and usually it's done with recibos verdes, because obviously if you're a family and you're all employees, you won't have a company from which to deduct that expense, so you can do it through recibos verdes, but you can still have a contract, and you can offer similar bonuses to what you would as an employer, so the extra 2 months pay and whatnot. So there is a difference, but most families that employ staff, however you want to call it, they will usually do it through green receipts.
And that's an interesting legacy, isn't it? The green receipts things was literally a receipt book back in the day, wasn't it? That people would carry around and issue. I suppose it's like a government-approved receipt book, and it was green, and that's why it's the Recibos Verdes. And now it's online, isn't it? So you can your housekeeper could go home or fire up an invoice from their tablet or phone for you whilst they're there.
Yeah, I mean, I did it back in the day when I was an independent service provider for a law firm here in Portugal, and all done online. It works really well, really easy, and it's a great way to start, because a lot of companies will offer that for the first year of an employee's contract, because you're not liable to pay social security contributions for the first year if you're on Recibos Verdes. So a lot of companies will offer that, especially if someone's coming from abroad like I was, and you're not sure whether they're going to stay or how long they're going to stay for. So that the system does offer some flexibility in terms of that. And it works really well. You do everything online. You can automatically generate an invoice. All the information is on there, and then you can monitor everything. So yeah, it does work really well.
And find out what your tax bill is as well with it on a different tab with that system. And I think probably what Wellcome's getting at here is there a sort of cash economy as well? I've heard that there might be, obviously we wouldn't condone that sort of behaviour, but it does exist, Wellcome.
Of course.
Sure. Of course, yes, absolutely. So hi from Hector from California as well this morning. Nice question coming in from Debbie Deuce, who started the Share and Care Portugal service for people who have been bereaved in Portugal. How's that going, Debbie? Do let us know. It's a fantastic thing you're doing. Good morning, Carl, and also Michael. Question: I'm sure a few businesses do also community funded projects too. Do you know of any application for Portuguese grants or funding to help get projects off the ground? There are centralized sources, aren't there, for finding out about these things, Michael?
Yes. There are a number of things available. What I would say to Debbie is, if she wants to send us an email later today, I can get back to her on that, because obviously it very much depends on the type of business. But there is funding available. There's also EU funding available, depending on the type of project and the dimension. So yeah, absolutely, there is funding available, which I can happily steer her in the right direction. In fact, I have one particular client that is a kind of an expert in doing that, so I'd be happy to introduce her.
Great, that's good news, Debbie. What is the email address for that, Michael? Yeah,
so it's michael@avanlight.com.
That's what I guessed, and that's what I'm putting into the comments now. So I'll post that up on the screen as well, so you can see that. And going back to the company naming thing, Sean Maguire, who runs a property business here in Portugal, we featured one of his fantastic properties in Castelo Branco recently. Very popular. People from abroad wanting to look at property in Portugal here, and their company is called Luxury Bubble, which kind of sums up what they're trying to do, I suspect. But sounds like one that came off the shelf there. Luxury Bubble, what a great name. Hank was asking about vaccinations, and Joel is answering still vaccinating here in Portugal and failing as usual from the Portuguese government. He's not a big fan, as any regular will know. Pete's chipping in with the comment or the question from Debbie. Following on from Debbie Du's question, I would also like to know if there's a funding available for a village community project, either Portuguese or European, and what sort of organisation body would you need to apply to for their support? So I think it's the same answer, is it not?
Yeah, definitely. And again, if it's a community project that has a sustainable impact on the local community, then again, at the EU level, there are a number of initiatives that can be sought out. And again, I'd be happy to talk about that offline. So yeah, anyone who wants to talk about that offline, please feel free to send me an email. I'll be happy to chat and point people in the right direction.
There you go. There's the address on the screen for you now, and it'll be in the comments. Peter Bleach commenting about the contracts, contracting employees. So no 0 hours contracts in Portugal. Morally, that is a great thing. Yes, absolutely. And you know, the cultural appreciation I have, yes, and a resistance to that, I think, although, you know, big corporations will be trying to do that, as I suspect they'll lead the way with that. But I'm reminded again about the beauty of, you know, the lunch allowance, how that contributes to society, how that makes Portuguese society more comfortable, I think, and more pleasant. And, you know, none of this al desco eating, you know, with your sandwich. Isn't that awful? And isn't it great that we don't see that so much in Portugal?
Yes.
Someone rushing to their desk with, I think if you ate a pre-packaged sandwich at your desk and a takeaway coffee and a packet of crisps, you would be looked on as weird in Portugal. And quite right.
I was looked on as weird because I used to do that when I had my first job in Portugal. I was working for a law firm called Miranda, so shout out to them. For the first, I would say, few months, I would get my sandwich and eat lunch at my desk. And everyone would be like, "What are you doing? Look at the sun. Let's go and have lunch." And that changed very quickly. I must admit.
I know.
Yeah. So it is a lovely thing because the working day in Portugal can be long. Not as long as in other countries like Spain, but it can be long. So having that hour and a half just to go out and eat lunch, which is affordable, might I add, not perhaps to do it every day, but at least once or twice a week to have a nice lunch is really achievable. And you know, what I will say as well about my experience of working as an employee is that the culture here is really, really good. So I mean, people are extremely hardworking and professional, and the language ability that the Portuguese have is astounding. So if you are, you know, coming from outside Portugal to establish a business and you want to hire people locally, chances are they'll speak really good English, and you will find very talented people here. So it is something I think that is a huge selling point that Portugal has. That the average kind of standard of work ethic is high. People are responsible and work hard.
Brilliant. And I know that from my experience of you, your lunchtime eating habits had changed by the time I met you, and we had that notable lunch.
Yes.
South of Lisbon, which is fantastic. And one of the things I really remember from that, and it's a question for you, and I'm sure this echoes you know, an inquiry from others, is how good your Portuguese is, Michael. And you ordered the lunch, as I recall, and I was thinking, wow, this guy's.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
how have you found that, and what do you recommend to people for learning the language, which is a recurring issue for people, obviously?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, obviously, try and learn it because you will be treated really well. People will respect you a lot more if you make the effort to speak. Even just saying, you know, bon dia, you know, just very little conversational things just to get you going. People will really respond to that very well. And the Portuguese are very patient in that sense. I guess if you're living in Lisbon or even a Porto, you can probably get away, and the Algarve, obviously, you can get away with not speaking a word of Portuguese and you'll be absolutely fine. But I would say do try and learn the language because it will enrich your experience. I started off with a tutor, but that didn't last very long. I was lucky. Yeah, I was lucky that. Yeah, well, I won't go into it. I think I had a tutor who was more interested in speaking to me in English than Portuguese. Okay. That was a problem. Yeah, that was the only reason. Not because I was working for a Portuguese law firm for 3 years. I was exposed to the language every day, so I kind of just naturally picked it up. Watched a lot of television, read a lot. You know, tried to read the newspaper every day. That helped. But I would say, you know, just immerse yourself in the language. Find things that you enjoy doing, hobbies that you would have done at home. Take them up. Get involved in your local community as much as you can, because that will make you feel part of you know, of the local community and being at home. and try and learn the language. And as I said, the Portuguese will love you for that, and it will enrich your experience.
Great advice. The immersion thing's important, isn't it? I mean, we recommend Mia Ejmerej and her online learning system, but the immersion is important as well, and that's how you learn, isn't it? I mean, when
and if I can just add, don't be disheartened, because it took me, and bearing in mind I'm not native, but I'm a fluent Spanish speaker because my mother's from Argentina, as you know. So I assumed wrongly that I would pick it up really quickly. But what I would say is that probably for the first year or maybe two, if someone is speaking to you quickly in Portuguese, you will probably not understand much of what they're saying. And don't be disheartened by that. It's just their way of speaking, because they leave out a lot of syllables, a lot of letters, even a lot of words when they're constructing sentences that you would ordinarily read, and it would make sense when you hear it. It's a completely different kettle of fish. So I would just say, trust the process. Eventually, it will be like, this is what it was like for me. Just one day, your head is being lifted from above water, and you can just start to understand everything. Yeah, it was like that. It's scary, because you're thinking, wow, am I ever going to learn to understand this language? And it can be really frustrating, even if you put your heart and soul into it. So I would say, just be patient and trust the process, and you will eventually understand it and be able to speak it.
Tremendous advice. Thank you, Michael, on the language there, learning Portuguese. That's fantastic. We'll be darting around in this conversation as comments come back to us, like this one. When I lived in Thailand, I employed a full-time personal assistant. Only cost $500 per month. I mean, if someone's working virtually for you, that's not a problem. You can continue to, I guess, if people are charging you in their native country, that you can honor those. But that's going to be difficult with a housekeeper. Well, Cooper.
Yeah, I mean, again, I haven't had anyone. We did have a nanny a few years ago, and I think this was 2016. It was about, I think we were paying her around €750 a month, which at the time was considered pretty standard. So, the costs aren't astronomical when you compare it to what it would cost to have a nanny in, say, the UK or the US. So it is definitely affordable. Yeah, and it's worth using the different websites and Facebook groups such as this one, I'm sure, and asking people and relying on that community for information. But yeah, it is achievable. It's not as expensive as you think.
And obviously, with when you employ and work with somebody like that, you get a road into the local community as well, which brings some other possible extra value as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Joel taking issue again here. It's his job, really. It's debatable about the workers' rights. In the last 10 years, the protection of the worker on the laws have declined a lot, says Joel. Interesting. Victoria Winter, new name, I think. Good morning. This is a great initiative. First time catching a live. Thank you, Victoria. You're most welcome here. I agree, says Dr. Joel, but we need to reverse that and defend the Constitution. Membership is going up, says Debbie Dews of Sharing Care Portugal. That's really good news. We put Michael's email up for you. Let's do it again just briefly before we go to more and further questions. So there we go. Michael Avanlight. Bon dia from Anna Vieira. Good morning to you, Anna, over there in Cascais. Andy the Doc Thompson. The problem resides in enticing companies outside from Portugal and trying to maintain the local companies here from setting off to other countries. Yeah, I mean, how do you solve that, Michael? I mean, these corporations are going to have expectations which will rock the boat here. And then how do you stop the brain drain going out from Portugal? Have you seen that change in the last 7 years?
Yeah, and I think to be fair, it depends on the sector. I mean, I think the Portuguese government and like the local business community has done a lot to attract international companies, and there are a lot of international companies here, and there are a lot of international companies that have relocated their headquarters or their primary European office here for all the obvious reasons. Because despite what we were mentioning earlier about the high cost of employing people here due to the taxes, it's still more cost effective than a lot of countries, and you can still pay lower salaries than you would in places like London or Berlin or even Madrid, And more importantly, the lifestyle here is so much better than a lot of other countries in Europe. So you have a happy workforce. And I would say for certain sectors, you know, the country really has done a great job, especially in the technology sector and startups. You know, you look at how it's changed in the last sort of 7 years since I was here. And I remember, I think I may have mentioned this the last time we spoke, Carl, but I remember people telling me in 2014 that Lisbon was going to be the new Silicon Valley of Europe. And I remember sort of chuckling to myself, you know, thinking that was farcical. But it really has started to, you know, look that way. And with the, you know, the Web Summit that obviously has been online last year and probably this year, but ordinarily you have, you know, sort of 70,000 people rock up in Lisbon for a week. You know, one of the biggest events in the sector. And there are incentives, which again I can talk about offline to anyone that is in that sector, especially if they're coming from outside the EU. You can apply for something called a tech visa, and you can move your entire team over on one visa, and you can bypass the CEF process a little bit by doing that. So it's worth bearing in mind there are advantages to relocating here as a business owner.
Yeah, and some amazing brains. You know, it helps to stop that brain drain from Portugal. Employ people here on decent rates.
I mean, this was the thing, right? Because I think when the credit crisis happened, a lot of Portuguese left because they couldn't get the opportunities here in Portugal, and now a lot of them are coming back. A lot of young people are coming back with an enriched CV because they've had the experience of working abroad. They've come home and they've either decided to set up their own company. I know a lot of people that have done that, and they're entitled to NHR status despite being Portuguese, providing they've lived outside of Portugal for 5 years. Yeah, they can apply for that. Just like they're treated as if they were a foreigner in that sense. So I know one case of a former colleague of mine in London who was Portuguese, who worked in London for 5 years. He then went back to Lisbon. So yeah, that option is available.
Tremendous. That's a lovely story to report. You know, that return and renaissance, possibly even of Portugal, the old family home. You know, like unshuttering the old family home in Central, and with NHR tax status as a Portuguese person, it could be amazing for the regeneration of some parts of Portugal. That so Gary's asking, do they have agencies that provide staff in a more simplistic way? Have you come across that, Gary? Because that's an obvious solution, isn't it, to the struggle for people to employ somebody person to person? Does that exist?
It does. Well, you mean like an agency that will provide staff depending on what the it does exist. I mean, I would say that it's depending on what you're looking for. So if you're talking about at home, if you're talking about, you know, staff at home, like someone to clean or be a housekeeper or be a nanny, I think it's better to go into the local community either via social media or through people you know, because you will find better options and probably cheaper options. If you employ an agency, it's going to be more expensive because they have to take a cut, etc. If you were to do it for a company, say a recruitment agency, obviously you have all the big players here like Michael Page. Depending on how specialized what you're looking for, you can use recruitment agencies. But you know, today with things like LinkedIn, everyone's on LinkedIn. You can advertise for jobs, and in Portugal, most people are used to that. So you don't necessarily have to use a recruitment agency. It just depends what your specific needs are.
There you go, Gary. Back to vaccinations for a moment. The Portuguese healthcare system has the capacity to deliver vaccines at a high level. I think we know that, don't we now? And that's been demonstrated. But Mark says the supply to Portugal is the real issue, of course.
Well, it's worth bearing in mind that today I think nearly 10% of the population has already had the vaccine. You know, those that choose to have it.
Okay.
So yeah, it seems like things are going well. Not the same pace as in the UK, but that's because the UK is using a different vaccine which they had access to earlier. But it does seem like in Portugal there is progress, so that's positive.
It was important, wasn't it, in the UK? I think for Boris to make that happen as opposed
you had to.
Yes. Okay. Hank, race to the bottom. This is inevitable, I suppose you might say, would be one cynical analysis of neoliberal capitalistic development in societies. Hank, take it. Thanks so much, says Pete. I'm sure that you will have a lot of emails flooding in, Michael, certainly from me. So stand by for emails from
no, honestly, delighted. Even, people that want to ask me questions about living in Portugal or anyone's thinking about, I'm always really happy to do it, because I've been an expat for 7 years, so I know what it's like to make a decision like that. I used to live in Spain before I lived here, so I can perhaps give an interesting perspective on that. So yeah, happy to receive emails asking questions about that as well. It's no problem.
Good man yourself. Thank you. Bon dia from Maxine this morning. Good bon dia to you as well, Maxine. There is also a lot of cash in hand casual work that goes on, does it not? I mean,
like everywhere, Gary. Yeah, it's not unique to Portugal, my friend. It's the same everywhere. You're always going to have that cash economy. I think probably it happens a lot more in Spain. I know we shouldn't always compare Portugal with Spain because they happen to share the Iberian Peninsula, but they're not the same country by any means. But interestingly, I remember when Spain was at the height of the crisis, and the unemployment figures were 25%, something crazy like that. That's when you realise that there is a lot of casual work going on, because there's no way that 1 in 4 people were unemployed during that period. Yeah,
and there's been a big sting, of course, hasn't there, for people who have been trading in cash with.
They really clamped down on it. So you have to be very careful. If you are considering doing that, be careful, because the Portuguese tax authority will clamp down on you hard.
Yeah, and of course, when help was being sought through the pandemic, it's like, okay, show us your accounts. We'll pay you based on what you've declared. So that was a big shock for some people, I guess. What will be unique is the name the Portuguese give it. Do you know what that is for the dark economy or whatever? Is there a Portuguese phrase for it, or cash in hand? Joel might be the man to tell us that.
Good question. I don't know, actually, because I don't do it myself, obviously, because I'm a good law-abiding citizen. I wouldn't know, right?
He would know. We might find out from a Portuguese person who knows the slang phrase for that. Joel and Hank talking about workers' rights, I think. And actually, it does prompt a question from me in terms of understanding the politics of this country, Michael. And, we're talking there, aren't we? Like, it's good for workers. That can be a little bit difficult for companies. And again, similarly with immigration, and I would like to think, although that you do hear of terrible stories in Lisbon and Porto of people who've been displaced by the inward investment and Airbnb and so on, do you feel that the Portuguese government has a slightly more responsible? I mean, probably in hindsight, seeing what's gone on in Amsterdam and Barcelona, do you think that the government does push back a bit better against that sort of problem here?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer, because I think what happened in 2011, I think, when they started the Golden Visa program, it was really needed to inject some investment into Portugal quickly, and that stimulus was vital. And if you look at what happened subsequently in terms of the economic growth of the country and how much GDP grew, and how much foreign investment came into Portugal, which obviously impacted positively on tourism and everything, then you could argue it was a very successful initiative. However, on the other side of the coin, for the everyday Portuguese that hadn't bought property until that point, all of a sudden you have gentrification. So people that were living in central parts of Lisbon started to have to look further afield, even as far as places like Almada, not even within Lisbon itself, but, crossing over the Tejo to the South Bank. And now even areas like that are more expensive as well as demand goes up. So I think it's the same challenge that any country has, where there's fast economic growth and a lot of investment from abroad. I mean, you look at the real estate market in Portugal in the last 12 months, and it really is astonishing. I mean, prices have continued to go up in spite of the pandemic. I think the rental market has gone down maybe 15 or 20%. So that's one positive, I guess. But the real estate market has continued to go up. I'm still convinced that we are in a bubble and it will eventually not burst, but it will probably disperse a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's why it's a really difficult question to answer, Carl, because in hindsight, can you have predicted everything that would happen on the back of that? Maybe. Could the government do more to protect, from the likes of Airbnb and whatnot? Maybe. But they're going to do everything they can to increase tourism, which makes up 10% of the country's GDP. So it's difficult to get that balance right. I mean, I would say with any country that wants to ensure more affordable housing for people, that it has to be built. There has to be more affordable housing available. There has to be more help for first-time home buyers and whatnot. So I think that is something that could always be improved. But I would say that had Portugal not taken that decision with the Golden Visa program, for example, in 2011 to increase foreign investment, then probably the situation would have been catastrophic.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah. And what I'm heartened by is the chamber, as I understand it, of Portuguese politics, is that there are voices of dissent. It's not a tiny bandwidth, is it? I think there's quite a good representation of views in there, like them or loathe them, but that's important.
Yeah, and we've had a stable government for the last 6-7 years, which not many countries anywhere can say. And whether you agree with them or not, depending on your political views, which I'm not, for obvious reasons, I'm not going to go into here, but I think what you can say is that it has been a stable government with stable leadership, and despite perhaps the mistake of allowing Christmas to go ahead, which maybe caused that increase in cases and deaths due to COVID in January and February, we are now at the levels we were at in October, and things seem to be more under control. So in general, I would say Portugal has fared quite well.
Brilliant. I love your fair-mindedness and analysis, your deep analysis, Michael. That's why you're here this morning. I
have to stay diplomatic, right?
I think you just naturally are. That's what I've always admired. Yeah, I mean, you've got your personal views, but I really admire how you endeavour to see things from many points of view, and I think that's maybe a reflection. As the point I was trying to make about the Portuguese chamber is that there is a wide range of views in there. It would appear to me anyway, with my limited grasp of politics, which can only be a good thing. It needs to be in the chamber and not on the streets in many ways. So Donna's saying "Bon dia alegria." Good morning.
Bon dia.
Lovely to have your company. What's the situation? I think we know the answer to this, Paul. If you have a person coming to do a bit of gardening, small part-time work, less than 5 hours a week, and you pay them cash, I just don't think technically that's allowed, is it? But that's up to them in some ways, I guess, to manage their accounts and finances.
Yeah, exactly.
Maxine Williams, do you have a tutor or learn from a book or app? I think Michael has mentioned his tutor situation. The app we recommend, or the system we recommend, is Mia's, who's joined us from time to time. We need to have Mia on again soon, actually. So I'll put that in the comments too for you, Maxine. And have a go. It was Michael's earlier advice. It goes a long way to speak the language and immerse yourself. I think you were saying, Michael, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's the best. Practice it as much as you can, definitely.
I'm American, says Hank, and we have some of the worst worker rights in the developed world. There's a poetic irony there, Hank, for sure. I think that's part of the reason you're on your way here, Hank, as well. Yesterday on the radio, they were calling for all kids in the UK to have subtitles to help their spelling. Oh, I see. It's been proven too, apparently. I guess the same works watching programs in Portuguese. Yes.
No, this is a great point, Penny. And I think, this is another reason when people ask me why do countries like Portugal and indeed, Scandinavia and even the Dutch, why is the level of English so high in general compared to countries like France, Germany, Italy and Spain? Obviously, excluding the capitals and a minority. But I would say that the main reason is because, like in Scandinavia, Portugal, they don't dub content. So if you watch a English or American television series or film on Portuguese TV, it will always be in English with subtitles in Portuguese. And that is definitely a reason why the standard of English here is so high, because everyone is used to watching and listening to English from a young age.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I talk to people. I'm trying my Portuguese with them. There's that moment always, isn't there? Michael will say, like, "Are you English? Let's speak English." Like,
yeah, you have to be quite insistent. It's a good point as well, Carl. This is another challenge you'll have in learning Portuguese, is that people will automatically divert to English, especially if it's in a more rural area and they're not having the opportunity to use it as much. They will go out of their way to speak in English. But if you say to them, I would like to speak in Portuguese, can we speak in Portuguese? They will change, or you just reply to them in Portuguese. That's what I tend to do, and then they'll quickly speak in Portuguese to you.
And when you ask them again, you say, like, did you live in America or England to speak this good English? No, I just watched a lot of TV as a kid. That is exactly what you're saying. And also,
sorry to interrupt, but it's just astounding because there's no consistency with that. So I have law firm clients who do all of their work in Portuguese, and their level of English isn't as good as, say, an Uber driver that I had the other day, or there's no consistency in that. But what is consistent is that most people do speak a very good level of English.
And maybe that's what happens when Portuguese kids get told off for watching too much TV. Little João is watching telly, and his mum tells him off, and I'm learning English, mum. Give me a I'm always astounded, says Phil, how the multilingual ability of people is generally undervalued in terms of employment, and not just in Portugal. Yeah, good point, Phil. Good point. Pete, echoing here that method there, informal method in terms of language learning. We found some terrifically bad Portuguese soaps on TVI. They're wonderful, like Crossroads with the same costume designers, and the dramatic
especially some of the Brazilian soap operas. They're even more dramatic, exactly like you just did there. Exactly like that.
Walk into a room and go, Well, two situations Joel is answering a Portuguese perspective. It's a person that doesn't do their taxes or income and gets caught later on, or is self-employed and does every single month the revenue and income and taxes. So there you go, laying it out for you there, Paul. Joel adding, for Hank's benefit, comparing to America, there is way more protection in the current state here. Anyone think this? You've got to expect this sort of thing on this show, Michael. Anyone think that Michael is a bit of a Tony Hadley, Spandau Ballet lookalike?
I've never had that one before, but I appreciate it. That's a good thing. I appreciate it.
Do you want to sing "Gold" or "Through the Barricades" for us? Just a couple of verses.
Gold is the only song I could sing from that band.
He's just a bit upset because he looks like Louis Spence. So he's still smarting from that. He's just dishing it out a bit. Could you recommend an online learning for the language, please? Yes, I will do that again. That is in our business directory if you go to language schools. But I'll pop that on the screen for you, Donna. Absolutely. Hank, I'll give a personal example. For me, I have to write to lay off. I have to work 90 days for my employer after I give him the papers to rescind the contract. So a bit of personal detail there. Which TVI soap would you recommend for absolute beginners learning Portuguese? The one where they pull the wildest faces.
Yeah,
will be the one you watch. All of them. Says Mike. And Dennis is here. Dennis Stead, please assist. What is the situation if I'm a resident and want to bring my son over to work for me? He will want to apply for residency. He is an adult and not an EU resident. So there is what's it called where families are brought back together again? There is that.
It's like a family. I don't know the exact word in Portuguese, like a family reunion or encuentro. And I think that is something legally you're entitled to. So as long as Dennis is legally residing here, he can easily bring his son over. That's not a problem.
As a reunification aspect.
Reunification, that's right.
Reunification, that's the one, isn't it? Okay, there, Dennis. Hope that helps. Again, look in our business directory. We've got a lot of professionals in there that help people with this sort of thing. Exactly, we work with the EI, so look in there and drop Michael an email by all means. Paul and Louise, honestly, I recommend watching the Portuguese version of Sesame Street. There you go. That's from Joel, who will have learned his American that way, and that's a really good reverse strategy there. I know it sounds weird, but Big Brother was quite useful as it was so obvious what people are saying. Joel,
you know what? That's a really good point because you're going to get conversational Portuguese, aren't you? It's not going to be scripted. It's not going to be rehearsed. You're going to get it more naturally sounding. So that's actually a brilliant. I wish I'd thought of that before, because that's actually not that I'm a fan of Big Brother, but that makes a lot of sense, Peter. So thank you for that.
We know people, don't we? We understand the universal language of human struggle as personified on there. So I need to pay myself much better with better benefits if I relocated to Portugal. Yes, Penny, you would have to do that. And I would personally insist that you went out for a 90-minute lunch break every day. So it's looking good for your relocation here. What online would you mind if I message? I could have the email, please. Yes, it was Michael at Avanlight. I'll leave it on the screen at the end, Maxine, for sure, so that you can get in touch. Would you yes, okay, we've done that. And there we go, that's the Portuguese for the cash economy, the biscatadas, now we know, called black money in France,
there you go.
Working under the table in the US, I think. And hi all from Don Vasey. What do you feel about the long-term effects of high debt to GDP ratio? Don from Northern Colorado, US. So what's your view? I know you keep an eye on this. You're not, as you say, you're a lawyer, not an economist, but I know you'll have a good view on this.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because in terms of the debt that was owed by Portugal to the IMF and the EU following the bailout that happened, and there were a number of countries included in that bailout, Portugal actually paid back that debt early. So they were due to pay it all back by, I think, next year. And they paid it back, I think it was 2 years ago in 2019. So they saved a couple of billion euros by doing that. So in terms of debts owed, there was a subsequent, effect from the bailout. Portugal is debt-free in that sense. Obviously, when you look at any debt data in Portugal, then you're always going to look at people's mortgages, because that's what accounts for most debt. And the banks have been extending the period in which people have support for their mortgages in terms of how much they have to pay, and that may change in the next few months, which could have an impact on the real estate market. I think that is one thing that could have an impact. If that support is lost, there may be some people that will default or have to sell, and that could impact the real estate market. So yeah, I would say, obviously, given the current situation, it's a global economic crisis, and all countries have, with the exception of perhaps China, have seen their GDP contract. So this is a global challenge for everyone, not just in Portugal. And time will tell. We'll see. I mean, my own personal kind of perspective on it is that there is still a lot of interest in Portugal. There is still a lot of foreign investment coming in, and that will continue to happen because Portugal is one of the, if I can be a bit biased, the most beautiful countries in the world to live in, and one of the safest, not just in terms of crime, but also in terms of healthcare. So it's always going to be an attractive option. And I think for that reason, Portugal will be absolutely fine.
Well said. And you kind of mentioned it there, but as far as the EU connection goes, Portugal is a poster boy, isn't it? In a kind of privileged status, chair, I think, of the EU at the moment, and also a poster boy in terms of telling off the other countries. You should be more like Portugal. I think Portugal is used to be other Southern European countries with, which may or may not be a good thing, but it's good for the country. Re-COVID, says Hank, cries in American. That's a sad comment. I hope that improves for you, Hank. Bondi, how are you doing for time, Michael? I know you're a busy guy. Do we need to...
I've got a bit more time, so I'm delighted that so many people are asking questions. So I'm happy to stay on a bit. It's not a problem.
Good man, appreciate it. Bon dia, obrigado. Michael, I have my own tour company in Amsterdam. I'm very keen on sustainable and responsible tourism and hope to help in Portugal. Are there organisations working on this there? I believe there are. Do you know of any, Michael?
There are. It's a good question. Yeah, but again, Doreen, if you want to ask me offline about that, I'd be happy to help. And I do know actually of one company from the Netherlands that provide tourism services here. That I can introduce you to that might be able to give you some more insight into that, specifically to that sector. So please send me an email, I'll introduce you.
And Doreen and I need to speak as well. Doreen, email me as well, because I think one of the great challenges for Portugal, if we're talking about sustainable and responsible tourism, we need to get people to come here for more than 3 days. I think that the long term for tourism is, to come for a month. and then ultimately to settle here. That's going to be good for Portugal. These 3-day visits, whilst they've been good in the short term, going into Porto, and going via Aveiro and Coimbra and flying out of Lisbon, that's a short-term cash generator, and it's great for putting Portugal on the global map. But we need something a little bit better than that, as I think we've seen from the pandemic.
Yeah, I think that's happened already, isn't it? I know a lot of people that, because of the flexibility of home working, they've just decided to rock up in Portugal. And obviously, even with Brexit, you can still stay here for 90 days.
Yes.
Without any kind of issue. So that does afford you the luxury of being able to, and I would say anyone considering moving here, you need to be here for at least a month, because you cannot compare the difference with coming here on holiday for a week or even 3 days to deciding to move here. You've got to be here a month and kind of see that daily routine and grind a bit to see if it's really for you. So yeah, it's going to help the economy. It's good for people who are making that decision as well.
So let's make that happen for Central Portugal, Doreen, you and me. And there's the Mia's contact details for the people who wanted to learn Portuguese online. Gary's saying, as a young man in the 80s, I spent many years jumping from temporary contracts, which were renewed every 6 weeks. Wow, this is no way to live your life, not knowing the future. Although Portuguese employment laws seem a little inflexible, it discourages employers using people as easily disposable assets. Well said, Gary. Voice of reason from our community. And the lookalike suggester as well. Also here, the kids are required to study English in school, says Donna, of course, which will help massively. Gary adding, the beauty of Central Portugal is only a small amount of people speak or want to speak English, so you're not able to wimp out on your Ingleguese.
There you go. Yeah, and that's another reason not to live in, Lisbon or Porto or the Algarve, that you'll be forced to speak Portuguese.
Yeah, that's great. You might fall back on your French from time to time in Central Portugal. Is being a native English speaker a job advantage now that more international companies are there? Sorry if you discussed this already. I got on late. I think it's. I mean, we're lucky, aren't we? All of us English speakers are so spoiled and lucky. I'm sure it's always going to help. Doreen, would you agree, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say though, because I think Doreen, I'm not sure, Doreen, if you're Dutch. I mean, it sounds like you might be if you're talking about the Netherlands. I think if you look at the direct foreign investment data of investment coming into Portugal, the Netherlands has been slowly climbing that. So obviously Spain, I think, is the #1 investor in Portugal, but the Netherlands is quite high up on that list. So, and I do know a number of Dutch companies that are here. So what I would say is English is probably not as valued as it would be in other European countries, just because the level here is extremely high. But for other languages like Dutch or even Swedish, where a Swedish employer or a Dutch employer may prefer to have someone that can speak fluently in that language, that could be an interesting opportunity, not just in terms of language, but I guess the cultural sensitivity as well. So I would say, obviously, being able to speak English anywhere is better than not, in business, because it's the universal language. But I would say in Portugal, it's not as big a differentiator as it would be in other countries, just because, as I said earlier, most Portuguese will speak a very good level of English.
Well said. Great point. Gary saying that Joel and Grover from Sesame Street, it all makes sense now. See, he's the lookalike guy, but that does make sense to me. If you know Joel and you're able to compare the pictures there of him and Grover. I don't know about Portugal, says Mark, but the UK debt GDP ratio is just over 100%. But after World War II, it was 300%. We have been conditioned to think that 40% was bad. Interesting point there. And thanks from Don for answering that question about that ratio. Jani from Belgium. Bom dia todos. A funny way to learn basic Portuguese. There's another one. The Price is Right in Portuguese, or Preço Certo. He's a real character in Portuguese. What's he called himself? Little Fatty or something. That's his own nickname that he's given himself. The guy who does that show is hilarious. So that's another good one.
He is really funny. He's really funny. That is definitely a great show to watch.
Okay. Paul says, if I bring €1 million in an old mucky paper bag, I can't use it. You can if you're buying the drinks for us, Paul. There's no problem there. We'll turn a blind eye. Question, what are the best ways to find a place for rent? Also, can you apply for a D7 residency visa while already living abroad at a Portuguese embassy, not in your home country, says Curtis. I mean, you can't apply for a D7 in Portugal. It has to be a Portuguese embassy somewhere else in the world. But what about rentals, Michael? Airbnb?
Yeah, you probably know a lot more about this than me. I mean, obviously that you've got a website called Idealista, which maybe we can put a link in the chat. I think that's the most common one, and that's a good website to check out. Even if you're just curious to look at how rent prices compare in Portugal, and obviously you can search by region, so you can see what you can get for your money in different parts of the country. It is now in English, which it never used to be, which is great because some of the Portuguese terms can be quite confusing, such as the way they describe how many rooms a house or apartment has. So I'll run you through it very quickly. If it's a studio, it's T0. If it's a one-bedroom apartment, it's T1. If it's a two-bedroom apartment, T2, and so forth. But then, strangely, if it's a three-bedroom apartment with an additional room that is not considered to be big enough to be a bedroom but could be used as an office, they'll say T3 plus one. So it's just bearing in mind that there's a unique way that the real estate market uses to describe property. So just bear that in mind when you're searching. But I would say that's a good website to start because you'll be able to get a good feel for what prices are like.
Michael said earlier on is that the rentals are down 15-20%.
They are. You'll see a lot of properties that have been advertised with a slashed price from what it was originally advertised at to what it is now. I know that some agencies do that on purpose as a marketing trick, so bear that in mind. But you will quickly get a really good feel for what is a good deal and what isn't.
Yeah, and go to because as well as Airbnb, there's now a new company in Portugal called Spotter Home. We have a relationship with them. Go to this link here, Curtis, premium member benefits in expatsportugal.com. Go to the Spotter Home link, and you'll get a member benefit with Spotter Home, who operate in a longer term way than Airbnb. It's a really nice new concept in rentals, so worth checking them out as well. Maxine saying, so if you wish to stay more than 30 days, it's a long process. Depends where you're from.
Yeah.
I think we'll probably need to go into that in greater detail on one of our webinars, or just go to the forum, expatsportugal.com, and say where you're from and you'll find out from other people, probably from your native country, what the processes are like. A good idea learning Portuguese online. Is there a CD? That's an old-fashioned thing, a CD, Gemini. Yes, you probably still, in fact, you probably get a really good bargain on learning Portuguese from a CD on eBay or Amazon somewhere, I suspect, there. And we're 8 minutes past 10 now. Michael's been so kind with his time and insight and analysis this morning. It's been great to have you back. Let's not leave it a year next time, eh, Michael?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Well, if we do, let's hope this time next year that things are as close to the new normal as possible. And listen, thanks for having me on again, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure. And really great to see so many people asking the right questions as well, because I think that's really important when you're considering such a important decision in your life. To move country, it's not an easy thing to do. It really isn't, but it can be so rewarding. And I think Portugal has so much to offer. So yeah, look forward to speaking with some of you.
We took it for granted, haven't we? Because you and I, we've taken for granted how we haven't sung the praises much of Portugal. We've gone into a lot of deep.
We've done that so many times before, haven't we? Like it's almost like we don't need to do it anymore, right? Because it sells itself now. Yes, indeed.
Yes, indeed. So thanks, Michael. Thanks, everybody, for asking questions. If I may say so, you've been gold this morning, Michael. We'll hope to speak to you again soon. Lots of love to the family. Take care. Bye for now. Have a great day.
All the best. Bye-bye.